Chris Hensley is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer member of FINRA SIPC, investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, Inc., a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and Houston First Financial Group are not affiliated.
The Houston Midtown chapter of the Society for Financial Awareness presents Money Matters with your host, Christopher Hensley.
Good morning, everybody. You're listening to Money Matters on KPFT Houston. I'm Chris Hensley. The time is now 10 a.m., and we have a great show lined up for you today. We're going to talk about a 7-day savings challenge and really how to relieve some of the financial stress that we're finding in our lives. We're going to be speaking with Wenfang Bruchett, who is the founder of blissfinance.com. So keep listening. Stay tuned. Keep listening. If you are a long-time listener, you know we always reserve the first few minutes of the show, tell you a little bit about SOFA, who we are and what we do, or just to give you kind of a calendar of events of what is going on in the community in the local Houston Gulf Coast area. Now we're coming off of an election, so I would be I would be put out to not mention something about the election here. This is our post-election show, so without going there on the politics side of it, I did want to mention about finance and so just a brief reminder. No suggestions on how to invest. That's why we have our disclaimers at the beginning of the show. So this is not a recommendation, but it is a reminder that even during the last election, when Obama took office, and typically during an election year, the first 90 days of transition, you will experience more volatility in the market. In fact, historically, the first year after a new president is in office doesn't mean you don't hear the words loss there, you don't hear the words growth there, but you're going to historically you have experienced more volatility in the market, so bigger swings. So just a reminder there. After that, coming off of our election day hangover, and with that, I will let you remind you that we are getting ramped up for Houston Money Week that takes place every April, and even though we're talking about April of 2017, we are well underway of getting that ramped up and planning it. And it's kind of like a wedding. When you plan a wedding, it takes months before you actually get to that event, and when it happens, it's over with in a flash. But you don't see behind the scenes, you don't see behind the curtains where there's planning, there's getting the caterers together, getting the guest list together. So that's what we are in the in the middle of doing right now, and in fact, we will talk a little bit more about that here in a moment with Wenfang, who is looking at me right now. So I'm going to turn her mic on, and we will get her. Wenfang, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Absolutely. And I wanted to share a little bit about you with my listeners, and I always kind of start the show with letting them know a little bit about you. It says, with over 25 years of leadership roles with major financial institution, Wenfang Bruchett has the hands-on experience to get clients out of their financial mess. Her financial acumen and innovative approach to financing have helped thousands of business owners to flourish and saved countless marriages. She has given people hope and solutions so that their lives are elevated to the next level. Again, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
And if you could maybe share a little bit about yourself outside of the bio so that we can get to know you just a little bit better.
Well, I was actually made in Taiwan. And I was moved to South Africa, so I got repackaged in South Africa where I had to learn the British English. From there on, I came to U.S. to study. Now I got to rebrand myself to be able to speak American English. And after that, I married my husband, who was French. So here I am, refined.
Oh, wow.
So the reason I share that with you is I'm totally diverse in different cultures. Therefore, I have a very unique perspective about life, about dealing with people, but also working with people that in such a different, diverse background. And even my dog, who's actually trilingual, she knows how to have a command in Chinese, in French, and also in English.
Oh, that's awesome. That is awesome. Well, so let's start from the beginning, because I mentioned now the website, it's blissfinance.com, but is it called Bliss Finance Academy, or is that the same or two different things?
It's pretty much the same. What I'm doing right now is I'm working to put a program together. There's an academy about how people can be really free and be happy with money.
Absolutely. So let's start with that. Why did you create Bliss Finance?
Well, back in March 2016, there was a gentleman who was in his early 60s. He was in my office, and I can see that his tears was coming down his cheek. He looked at me, and he said, "Wenfang, thank you. Thank you for everything you've done for me." And I had a chill when he said that, because when he came into my office, he had asked for a $5,000 increase on his credit card so he can pay additional bills. And this is a highly professional, highly competent professional who has really pretty decent credit. But he had over 8 pages of credit report with debt.
Wow.
So my highlighter was going dry because I was trying to figure out a way to help him out. And at the end, I managed to consolidate everything under one specific payment with a specific end date. All he left with was a mortgage and a car. So when he shared with me, Wenfang, most people just give me what I want. They never take the time to analyze everything. So I gave him hope. I gave him solution. And when he walked down my office, I can feel the light, the weight that just got lifted up. And I said to myself, you know what? I got to do more of this. I got to make sure I can scale it. And that's the reason why I created Bliss Finance, where I can actually train more people at a bigger level.
So that when you were telling that story, it reminds me that there's a myth out there that when it comes to credit, that the people that are in over their heads fall into one income class. It's that people think, oh, it's low to moderate income. In fact, the person that you just mentioned was a higher wage earner, and yet they were still on this treadmill, this repeated credit card debt. And so that's something that I found to be true as well, that it's not always what you think is going on there.
And I think on top of that, I always kind of laugh at people when people come to my office. I say, you're going to be naked in front of me. They're like, what do you mean? I say, you know what? I got to see everything about you. It's not what you own. It's how much you really own that's under your title. Most people, they have a lot of stuff, but everything is belong to the lender.
Right.
So that is where I want to make sure that people have the right information so that they can be free to be truly independent and have everything they own.
And that's hard. You see, I've the same experience as well. So let's talk about that a little bit. When you're meeting with people, or when you've met with people in the past, what do you think the biggest roadblock for someone who is trying to be financially successful is?
Well, I think you have to define what is financially successful. Everybody's got different definitions. For one can be, oh, I just want to live in this nice fancy house paid for, or someone wants to be retired. So everybody's got different goals. But one of the major things that I think is we need to take it back. We need to dial it in. We need to know what exactly is the balance of finance. Financial success is not a road. It's a journey, but it's really an everyday. So what I have, I know the viewer can't see this, or the listener can't see this, but what I have is visualize a scale. Mm-hmm. Think about you have a scale. You're the one who's holding the scale. On the left hand of the scale, you've got what we call budgeting. So when you have a good budgeting, you're able to save. So that's where the scale is balanced, right? A lot of people, they've got a lot of money invested, they have a lot of 401k, but they don't have $2,000 in their checking account. So when emergency comes, guess what happened? They had to go and get a loan against 401k. They have to turn around and come to the bank or financial institution looking for that small amount of loan because they did not budget properly and they didn't have that saving. So in addition to that, one of the things, the biggest roadblock people don't realize to balance your finance is you got to have the right mindset. What is a mindset? Well, mindset is, are you doing everything to satisfy your ego, or are you doing everything to satisfy the higher self? How many of us make those purchases? It's really just because I want to compete with the Joneses, right? And yet we're financing our lifestyle. And as a result, our health get deteriorated because we're so stressed about making those payments. So all of that is very relative along the line of balancing your finance. So if you have the right mindset, you're going to have a better health. If you have a better health, you won't have all those unnecessary expenses for medical bills. Then you're going to be richer. So that, the last component of that is the debt. When you think about the scale, if you balance your scale properly, that personal debt is what weighs most people down. And if you're able to find a way to eliminate that, that is where your balance, that is where the roadblock is going to be removed, and you can achieve anything you set your mind to become.
So that's a lot of information that's super important. I mean, you gave us the examples of the person who doesn't have that $2,000 in their cash reserve or their safety cushion or their safety net in case something happens, and then they end up going to the HR director and asking them to do an emergency loan or something like that, or maybe they have an old 401k out there and they're taking it and they have to pay penalties, taxes, and early distribution penalties on it. If you look at how many people are just one paycheck away from being destitute, it's a lot. There are a lot of people out there like that. So then you also talked about the mindset, the correlation between physical health, the stress that you feel when you are under debt, when you have credit card debts, when you have the debt collectors calling you every day on the phone. That is in the background, that taking up bandwidth in your mind and pushing you away from the mindset that you need to be into if you are wanting to be financially successful. You also mentioned right at the beginning something that's extremely important is budgeting. How important is budgeting? You know,
there's a myth out there. People consider budgeting is subtraction. So what I mean by subtraction is, let's just assume someone makes $2,000. So they take a $2,000, they would say, okay, my rent is X. They start minus all those numbers out. At the end, they're like, okay, I got everything budgeted. But wrong, Chris. That is not the way you budget. The way you budget is you got to allocate the money out. So what I have is what I call a bucket budgeting. So first of all, the mistakes that people made, first of all, is they mix their income expenses under one account. I have seen this on a regular basis in the financial services world where people just don't have any idea what's in and out. So what I have always stated, when you have a budget, you will allocate to an account called mandatory account. That's where all the specific mandatory, if anything fell, this is something you got to make sure. You got to make sure you pay your mortgage. You got to make sure you pay your gas. Make sure all of the mandatory. The other bucket that I have created is what I call the cushion account. This is what most people don't have. This is where you got to make sure you put the escrow in for your health. You got to put some rainy day saving. You got to put some reserved. That is a big bucket that people don't normally allocate out. And the last, not least, is what I call the life account bucket. Those are the account where you got to have fun. But the way I look at when you have fun, you're going to use cash. And why? Because once your cash is out for that month, you're done. So that's how you got to be able to manage yourself. So those are different little strategies that I have created to the point that when you budget, when you allocate your money out, there's no stress because every single dollar is accounted for and it's got proper home for it.
I love that. I love the idea. One, you mentioned that it's not just that subtraction, just sitting down and doing plus and a minus, assets, liabilities, income, expenses, but putting things into buckets. And you mentioned the mandatory bucket, the cushion. Some mandatory thinking, those fixed expenses, things that are non-negotiable. You have to have those things. If you don't have those things, they may turn the lights out.
And that's exactly right. And that's the reason why it's called mandatory. And that has nothing to do with the cable. You can live without cable.
True. And people forget that.
So those is what I classify is if something will happen, absolutely is happening, can you live without anybody evict you? That is what I call the mandatory one.
Well, I love that. There's an author, Mary Hunt, who she used to write a magazine called Cheapskate Monthly, but I've had her on here before, and she talks about something called a freedom account. It's very similar to that, where you break everything down into these sub accounts, even as much as the gifts that you're getting for Christmas, and that's going to lead us right into our holiday discussion here. But even allocating those things that would fall into your lifestyle bucket in advance,
absolutely,
and being conscious of them before you get there.
And you know what's funny when you mention that is because I even have an account for my dog.
Oh, wow. So nothing goes left out.
Absolutely.
Left out.
People don't realize that. Do you know how expensive it is to have a dog, right? And my little dog has an account under her name, well, subtitle, right? It's my name, but it's her subtitle. Right. And when she goes to the bank, she loves it because she gets a treat. She's a customer. She wants to make sure her account is proper accounted for. So, absolutely. And that's where I do believe you got to make sure that you have everything separate out. So at the end of the year, I've seen so many clients at the end of the year, they're scrambling to pay those taxes. They're scrambling to pay those insurances that are due. So if you have those allocated out, everything is going to be worry-free. And that is a beauty when you have everything bucketed properly.
Absolutely. Now, we already kind of touched on this a little bit, but we are heading into the holidays shortly. They'll be here. What tips can you give us when it comes to the holidays and our money?
Well, first of all, I believe you've got to make sure you set aside. What is your budget? It's not how much I can swipe, because it doesn't matter what kind of limit you have. You got to say to yourself, okay, let's just say my budget is going to be $1,000 for the entire holiday. Put that $1,000 in advance. Put it in a separate account. That way, you will only leverage it either by debit card, by cash, or if you have to use a credit card, make sure that payment comes from that specific bucket. So by reallocating that in advance, that is going to save you a lot of money.
So that's being proactive about it, not waiting till the last minute. And I think we all have those friends, family members, associates, people that we know that in January and February they're having to play catch up from the credit card hangover from December, and that we mentioned keeping up with the Joneses. That's one of the worst times when it comes to spending. So that's super important. Now I want to kind of circle back, because you did mention something earlier about credit. Just for a second. What about credit? Is that important? Where does that play into this equation?
I think credit is important. You got to leverage it. And the reason I say leverage it is I think most people make the mistake of using credit and finance their lifestyle. Think about, we went out and got a nice pair of shoes. At the end, instead of that $50 purchase, we end up paying $100 for that pair of shoes because we are using credit the wrong way. I do believe credit is extremely important because you got to make sure you've established that. And I'll use myself an example. Years ago that I was starting out, I had a little credit card, and I didn't know the difference between the credit card. So I just went ahead and used it. And the fatal mistake I made was I used it as a cash advance. Ouch! So that cost me the entire paycheck. I didn't know any different. And I majored in finance, Chris. So
right there with you.
And after that, I had an investment opportunity where I invested a little condo because I didn't have credit. So my friend actually had his sister lend me some money. So we did a little financing together. And of course, the rate was outrageous. I didn't know any better. So at the time, I had a little renter. So he rented the house or a little condo. So I was so proud because my ego was like, okay, I'm the landlord now, but I was renting the same time. So here I was paying rent, getting money from my renter, but I was losing money. So I decided to tell my renter, you got to move. I need to move in. But I forgot, Chris, I had a lease agreement.
Right.
So I got out of it. And because I was not living there, so I ruined myself of credit for the next 7 years. So that was a very expensive lesson that I had to learn because I didn't have any credit. I ruined my credit. But now I've learned, what does it take? The reason I say credit is very important, I'll give you an example. I had a police officer. I gave him about $20,000 line of credit years ago. And there was one time he went to the auction. He saw this wonderful car that he wanted to turn around and buy it. So he had advanced that line of credit. He paid $10 at the time of the interest. He flipped the car. So he was making money, but it only cost $10. So those are the things that I want the listener to understand. Credit is beautiful if you know how to leverage it.
So leverage is a good word when it comes to credit. And you mentioned right at the beginning, I think not everybody has those stories when it comes to credit cards, but the ones who do, those lessons that we learn, same here. And when I was in school, I remember when you would go to the bookstore, they would give you those free squishy balls or something, some kind of gift to give you, get your attention, and they would get you right there as you're in school, signed up for these first credit cards. So usually everybody gets one of those, and then they'll have a story. And that's what I want to pass on to listeners and people who are listening to this is when we talk about these things, it's because we've been there.
Exactly.
And we don't want people to make those same mistakes. Now, on the other side of the coin is the leveraging of the credit and being able to turn around and use it for something that the police officer who was an entrepreneur on the sidelines,
Absolutely.
who was flipping cars and bringing income into his life there. So it can be a double-edged sword. It can be a good thing. It can be a bad thing. But the leverage part of it is really kind of neat if you haven't thought of it that way before. Speaking of entrepreneurs, do you have any advice for entrepreneurs or small business owners?
Absolutely. I have worked with so many budding entrepreneurs. They always want to be their boss, and I encourage them. However, any one of them that came to my office, the first thing I asked them is, have you taken your house in order? And they look at me like, what do you mean? I said, how are you dealing with your personal finance? Before you talk about business credit, where are you? So I always recommend, if you're ever thinking about going to business, give yourself a 1-year advance preparation. So what I mean by that, take a look at your finance, where you are, because you are not going to get a financing just because you start your business, just because you bank with this particular institution for years. It doesn't matter. What matters is, what have you done for yourself? Have you paid yourself? And what are you, the stage of life? So a couple of things I always tell folks. If you have a lot of credit card debt out there and you think about getting business, get rid of it. Because you will need every single available limit that you need. Chances are, if you are in the service business, a lot of bankers are not going to be giving anything because there's nothing tangible. We bankers love something that we can hold on. So you had to think like us, right? Why do I need to give you money if there's nothing I can grab? Especially the first couple of years, it's going to be very risky. So that's the first thing. Entrepreneur, get your house in order first. Make sure if there's anything that you can establish, a nice line, a nice home equity line, because you'll be able to get that before you actually leave your job. Because we need that income to qualify you. So thoughts, food for thoughts right there. Have everything's prepared. So once you're ready to take that plunge, you won't scramble for that. All you have to do is focus on your business venture instead of financing.
So a lot of things you just mentioned kind of set off flags here for me. Not good flags, not bad flags. The idea of making sure your house is in order before you go down that road. My experience when I was in banking, and it sounds like you experienced this as well, is a lot of times we would have people come in after the fact, and so they started the business. They might have been qualified for a home equity line of credit, but by the time they got to us, it was too late. They were down that road. They always say the first 2 or 3 years are going to be the roughest. Well, before you go down that road, doing things like getting that HELOC in advance, or just even getting your house in order and preparing, making sure that you're not taking that credit card debt in there with you, that you have open lines. If you think it's going to take 2 to 3 years, it's probably going to take 6.
Absolutely. And that's another thing I want a listener to understand, some of the qualifications. What exactly the banker is looking for? Because if you walk in understanding from our perspective, the lender's perspective, then you will know why you qualify, why you don't qualify. So that's another key piece of information, is understanding in advance. Do your homework front. What does it take you to get qualified?
That is so important, because you might have people that had A credit, 700s, and then all of a sudden, so that looks good when they pull the credit score and you see that number there, and then you say, okay, well, where's your income coming from? And you have turned off the switch for consistent reportable income, and that's what bankers love to see. They love to see that income. You say, okay, we can look at your statements, we can look at your pay stub, we know this is coming in consistently, repeatedly, we can see a history of deposits coming into your bank account. when you become an entrepreneur and a business owner, you're going to see peaks and valleys. That's going to be up and down, and being able to report that income is one of the things that bankers are looking for when they're given loans.
And a lot of times I've seen a lot of taxes, and people always tell me, "Wenfang, I make a lot more." I said, "I know that. Trust me. You don't need to sell that to me. The problem is I got to see what's on paper." So to me, the story about where you are, you got to be able to back up that document. And a lot of budding employees, self-employed that I have always shared with, don't just take a draw. Do not just pay yourself from account A to your own personal account. Make it proper. Make it as a paycheck. Right. Because that itself is going to help the lender to say, yes, you actually pay yourself, you actually contribute to the taxes.
That's hugely important. I mean, just even setting up like a paychecks or something like that where you're running it through a payroll so that it's, when you need a loan, when you're ready for a loan, that's so much easier than doing self-employed than you have to, because almost every small business owner I know plays the tax game, where we get this much coming in the door, but after the end of the year when we write all of this off, this is what it looks like on paper. Well, that's great until it's time to buy a home or until it's time to buy a car. And then they ask you, how much income have you brought back? And you've got some of the businesses are operating on a loss for many years.
Right.
It's going to be a long time before they're able to get lending there. So that's super important. And we're bumping fairly close towards the end of the show, so I wanted to make sure. One of the things I talked about right at the beginning was the 7-day savings challenge. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is with Bliss Finance and with the 7-day?
One of the things that I have seen people that they can't seem to save. They think saving is too difficult. So what I have done is I made something a little fun. What I have done is every single day you get a little snippet of a 3-minute video, how to save effortlessly, how to do things that you don't even know, and you put money in your pocket. That is what I challenge to the listener, to start, to get into the movement, to save, because if you can save $1, $5 a day, think about the power of the compounding. You're going to see that emergency fund is going to grow. And it's going to be something that is so easy. And this is the time to do it because we're in the holiday. If you don't save now, we're not going to start saving. Yesterday was gone, right? We can't undo what's the past, and the future has yet to arrive. You only have today. So that is what I want to challenge everyone. Start saving.
Absolutely. So anybody who wants to take Wenfang up on this challenge, not only can you get started and do it today, but if you go to the website, which is blissfinance.com, you're saying that there's a video that they'll be sent as they go along on this journey, yes, this challenge.
Absolutely.
To start saving.
And I would love to hear that from you because I love the successes that you'll be able to earn as a result of that.
Absolutely. In the last few minutes that we have here, I wanted to talk about Houston Money Week because you are not only are you a partner, you're on the leadership committee with me as well. And so I know that there are a lot of KPFT, we get a lot of listeners, a lot of other nonprofit organizations, community groups out there. And if they are thinking about being a part of Houston Money Week, can you tell us a little bit about the experience, how your experience has been with Houston Money Week?
Fabulous. It's such an honor and privilege to be part of this community grassroots effort. It is actually once a year where the communities get together. And this past year, actually, I participated with the UH Small Business Development team. Yes. I was actually on the panel where I actually gave information about credit. And it's amazing, the audience of the knowledge that they had no idea. So that is what we're doing in the Houston Money Week. It's really just provide this education from the personal finance to the business finance and to how to save. It's such a wonderful collaborative effort. So I encourage anyone who's interested, participate.
Now, how much does that cost somebody to go to one of these small business seminars at U of H?
$0.
That's what I like to hear. In fact, all of the Houston Money Week educational seminars and events that we have, it's $0. There's no cost, and it's all part of Financial Awareness Month.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Money Matters Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, visit us on the web at www.moneymatterspodcast.com.
drop us a line on SpeakPipe on the right-hand corner. It will receive any voicemails, questions, thoughts, concerns that you have about the show. In addition to this, we recently launched a Patreon campaign. Click on the Donate Now tab to hit the tip jar and find out what Patreon's campaign is all about.